To discuss all of this, I'm joined now by former federal prosecutor Joe Moreno and Leanne Caldwell, Washington Post live anchor and political reporter. Thank you both for joining me. Joe, if I can turn to you first, how serious are these charges that Hunter Biden is facing, and why are they coming now?
Hi, Katrina. Well, they're serious in that you could look at up to 20 years in prison for these types of charges. That doesn't mean he'll actually get that if, in fact, he's convicted. I would typically expect something like 24 months on conviction of charges like this. As far as why they're coming now, well, David Weiss had a 5-year, what we call statute of limitations, in order to bring these charges. And that 5 years was about to lapse at the end of this month. So at that point, he had no choice but to either bring the charges or drop them entirely and lose the ability to bring them. So I think the cynical view is that he was backed in a corner and had no choice. But the matter is, he has brought them now, and they are serious.
Leanne, how is this all going to impact Joe Biden? We know how protective he is about his family, and here we have his son facing jail time potentially if convicted.
Well, there's a question of how it impacts him personally and the question of how it impacts him politically. As your reporter stated, he does not like his family to be bothered with and to be challenged in such a way, but he usually doesn't express that publicly. Politically speaking, it has been a very tough week for Joe Biden, as you all have set up so well. His son has been indicted. He has the launch of this impeachment inquiry, which we can talk about that separately. That was also done for very political reasons by Speaker of the House, Kevin McCarthy, getting a lot of pressure from his right flank to do that. But in addition to that, Joe Biden is also facing a slew of very low poll numbers, polling just in the high 30% on a favorability rating. And so the last few weeks for Joe Biden, culminating with the indictment of his son, has been very tough. And it's unknown how it's going to impact the presidential election, especially if it's against former President Donald Trump. Republicans think that Joe Biden is the most corrupt president ever. Democrats think Donald Trump is the most corrupt former president ever. What do those independents think? And also, which base will be more motivated to turn out?
Joe, how do you think this is going to reflect on President Joe Biden? I mean, he's separate to this investigation, obviously, but the critics of Joe Biden are very keen to lump the president and his son in together.
So officially, it has no connection with Joe Biden at all. And I think that some would see that this might be a relief that it's only gun charges because they're completely separate from Joe Biden. They have nothing to do with him, as opposed to if tax charges or money laundering charges or something that more extensively touched the finance of the Biden family, that would be more worrisome to Joe Biden. So this really is isolated from him. And if these are the only charges that are brought, he's not affected legally at all. Now, otherwise, in terms of just unofficially, it's embarrassing. And you had a lead in when you talked about two of the potential defenses that Hunter Biden may bring. One of them is to challenge the constitutionality of these gun laws. So for a president that is so tough on guns, it will be interesting to see his son challenging the very constitutionality of the guns that the Biden administration is so intent on enforcing.
And would you see this as being quite a lengthy legal process then?
It doesn't have to be. This is actually an extremely simple gun charge. And I think the big question is why it took David Weiss 5 years to bring it. And this is like a one-page indictment and about 10 minutes before a grand jury. So it's actually a very simple charge. And as far as the idea that the diversion agreement prevents it being brought, that's wrong because it was never signed off by the probation office. So Hunter Biden can make that constitutional argument, and that could take some time if it goes to the Supreme Court. But as far as the case itself, it's really a slam dunk. I mean, it can be done in a day.
And Leanne, as Joe said there, these charges against Hunter Biden have nothing officially to do with Joe Biden. But you mentioned it briefly earlier. How does it sit alongside the impeachment inquiry which Republicans are bringing against Joe Biden? And they are, many of them, quite keen to link the president and his son.
Absolutely. That's what they're trying to do, is link the president to his son. But there's been no evidence of that yet. And we don't know if there will be any evidence of that. You know, you think about the average viewer of consuming media and how closely are they paying attention? And does it just get all mixed up and people aren't really paying attention to the details? And so the details get lost in translation. But this is setting forward a very tough legal process for Joe Biden, for his son, Hunter Biden. But Democrats on Capitol Hill and Democrats I speak to publicly are standing by Joe Biden and President Biden. I asked the top Democrat in the House of Representatives today if he has any concerns about Joe Biden running for re-election. And Hakeem Jeffries of New York said he doesn't. But privately, there's a lot of skittishness about, like I said, Joe Biden's low poll numbers, even though they think that this impeachment inquiry is completely bogus and Democrats plan to fight it tooth and nail. There are concerns that it is going to have a negative impact on him politically. Now, on the flip side, one last thing I'll say is that impeachments usually help the party of the person who's being impeached. Republicans were aware of that during the first Donald Trump impeachment. They think that this helped the first impeachment helped Donald Trump politically, and they are a little bit concerned that moving to an impeachment inquiry of Joe Biden, if that becomes an impeachment, will actually help Joe Biden politically. So we're just going to have to wait and see. A lot of complicated dynamics at this point, and what is definitely not just a straight political election.
A lot to watch next year, of course. Yeah. And Joe, quickly, just to you, do you think, I mean, we already saw one deal fall apart on Hunter Biden with the prosecutors. Do you think, is there a deal to be done for him here, or does he face jail time?
I think he makes a deal. I don't think he wants a long, drawn-out, embarrassing spectacle for his father. I think he makes a deal. And since prosecutors were so willing to make a deal a few months ago, I think he can still get a good one if he tries.
Okay, Joe and Leanne, thank you both for joining us.
Thanks, Katrina.